Night shift workers. What's the weirdest thing you've witnessed at 3 a.m.? I worked the night shift at a hotel, and around 3 a.m., a guy came down to the front desk in a full business suit that was visibly soaking wet. Like he'd just walked through a storm, except it hadn't rained all night. He was barefoot, holding a plastic cup with a goldfish in it, the kind you win at a fair. He set the cup down very carefully and asked if we had a microwave because the fish was cold. I told him we didn't, and he nodded like that confirmed something he already suspected. He asked if the lobby thermostat could be turned up for just a few minutes. While I was doing that, he started telling me he had a meeting in the morning and needed the fish to be alert. After about 10 minutes, he thanked me, put the cup inside his suit jacket like an inside pocket was made for this exact situation, and went back upstairs. An hour later, he checked out early, still wet, still barefoot, and left a 5-star review mentioning the excellent late-night hospitality. I never saw him or the fish again. What does any of that mean? The only logical explanation is that he himself was also a fish, but he got turned into a human because he needed to get his best friend into the work because they had a big business meeting coming up in the morning. Probably with a snack cracker at Pepperidge Farms. I quite honestly can't see it being anything other than that. Also, dude, if these are the kind of stories we're going to be reading today, sign me up. This is ludicrous. Next story. Was driving downtown near a major hospital. Saw a very tall man walking along buck naked. Saw a cop working a traffic detail down the street, and I told him, and he just shook his head and asked, "Why is it always a guy?" Next story. I used to do night shifts monitoring a data center. The weirdest thing isn't what you see, but what you hear. When you sit in a room with thousands of cooling fans humming at the exact same frequency for 8 hours, your brain starts creating audio pareidolia, basically hallucinating patterns in the white noise. By 3 a.m., I would swear I could hear a distant radio playing or people whispering in server aisles, but it was always just the fans. At least that's what you think it is. Actually, that's slightly reassuring. Quick story, I was dog sitting for someone not too long ago, and I was on the toilet after a long night, don't ask. But around 3 a.m. I hear as crystal clear as I've ever heard anybody cough before. So I naturally get up and I go to check the windows and the doors, and I find out that the back sliding door to this house has been unlocked. And I've always been spooked out by it, but you know what? Maybe there was just a fan giving me some sort of paranoia. Next story. Not 3 a.m., but 1 a.m. I worked a gas station next door to a strip club. I had a guy wordless limp in. His eye was all swollen and bloody, his clothes were torn, and he looked rough AF. He wandered around the store for a few minutes and didn't respond to anything I said. He then walked out and up the street. I noticed as he left that he was missing a shoe. It was really strange. Later that night, the dancers and bouncers came in once the club closed, found out it was the guy's birthday, and his friends got him a dance on the stage with all the dancers. The place had a very strict no touching certain areas rule. This gentleman received a couple of warnings from nicer dancers. Then he grabbed the wrong dancer inappropriately. This dancer was a known firecracker. She turned around while pulling off her shoe and popped him in the eye with her heel. He pushed her off the stage, and the bouncers did what bouncers do, and he lost a shoe in the scuffle. His friends watched this happen and then went back to what they were doing. Next story. Worked front desk at a Howard Johnson overnight. Had some cops walk in and say someone kept calling emergency services from one of our rooms. They go to the room, and I could see on the security screens when she answered the door. She was very naked, and one cop walks in and the other looks behind him before going in. 30 minutes later, they come out, stop by the front desk, and tell me that she was just drunk and didn't know how to turn off her cell phone. Yeah, Next story. When I was an overnight manager for a retail company, we had one individual come in almost every night, go straight to the dairy section, pick up blocks of cheese, and tell them how bad they were. He would then smack the block of cheese several times before moving on to another one. We called him the cheese spanker. Was he buying these cheeses, or was somebody else getting his assaulted dairy? Check your fridges, people, for the cheese spanker might just have spanked your cheese as well. Be careful. Next story. Not night shift all the time, but a varying shift pattern. Oh, the joys of forensics. Can people crime in office hours only, please, so the time-sensitive testing is at a responsible hour? About 4 a.m.-ish, on my way to a job, man walking what appeared to be a pet goat on a lead. Man was naked. Goat had a jumper and scarf. Man waved and asked if we wanted to pet his goat. Next story. When I worked security at a 24/7 gas station, I witnessed 2 cars pulling into the parking lot. The drivers got out and threw hands until they both fell over, and they got up, fist bumped, got back in their cars, and left. It was like a hockey fight broke out. Knee touched the ground and the fight was over. Next story. I was zoning out listening to an audiobook on my MP3 player in the frozen foods, changing sale signs and price labels when a clip-clopping noise caused me to look around. A skinny nude man in a crotchless purple fishnet bodysuit, day-glow yellow 6-inch heels, a white wig, completely bedazzled Franken beans, a mini Hello Kitty purse, and an old manual egg beater was in the ice cream section a few freezer doors down from me. Trying to focus on matching barcode numbers and not this disco ball, suddenly, BAM! His sequin sparkle package is inches from my face, and they're tapping my shoulder asking if mint chip or cherry vanilla sounds better in a cone. Both are good. Well, that was the right answer apparently, because he looked jubilant, thanked me, and threw sugar cones and sprinkles into his cart with the ice cream and clip-clopped back to the front of the store. Next story. Worked a night shift in a hospice. There were 2 categories of patients, those in for symptom control and those actively dying. That night I had 3 rooms of 3 patients who were in for symptom management but weren't about to depart. They were all in their 70s. At the start of the evening, their collective wives and families had been visiting. 3 o'clock in the morning, I go for a quick walk around just to check that all was okay. Heard some weird creaking, banging noises from one room. Knocked on the door, nothing. Noise continued, so I popped my head around, saw one guy on his hands and knees, spreading his cheeks, with one blowing him and another rimming him. The guy doing the rimming looked up, spotted me, gave me the casual nod, and just cracked on about. Well, I backed out, shut the door, and tried to scrub my brain of what I saw. Guess when your time is nearly up, some people think, I've never tried X, and go for it. The day nurse had a delicate conversation the next day to check that all was consensual and all was good. Next story. I worked IT night shifts in an office building that had cable TV throughout with many wall-mounted TVs. One night, at about 2 to 3 a.m., there was an unusual alarm from the ground floor server room, so I left to inspect it. On passing through the closed reception area, I saw the security guard who was manning the front desk. He saw me, startled, and then I realized why. He was tuned into Playboy TV, sat there with a towel, body lotion, and rubber gloves. Thankfully, the desk was providing him and me with the much-needed privacy. Next story. I hosted all-night video game events 2 every weekend for 12 years. We operated 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Tons of things. A kid pulled an airsoft gun on me. A homeless guy spent $800 a month to attend events. Drunk parents driving to attempt to pick up kids. A kid that attended events shot his dad and killed his sister. They were regulars at the shop. The shooting did not happen at our location, though. People would attempt to steal things regularly, not just snacks and drinks. I'm talking games, controllers, the 8-ball off the pool table like 4 or 5 times. And there were many more weird things. Next story. I worked at the only 24-hour pharmacy in town. I once had a woman accuse me of making her feet bleed while shoving her feet in my face because I was sending her bad vibes. I hadn't been thinking about her at all, and also her feet weren't bleeding. I also had people come in who were actually covered in blood and just act like everything was normal. They would just buy something and then leave. There was also a guy who came in the middle of winter wearing shorts and a t-shirt. He passed out in the women's restroom and scared the absolute crap out of me when I walked in because I didn't know he was in there. He woke up and walked out like nothing had happened. I got to know the local police very well at that job. Also, weirdly, I got to know multiple local prostitutes, and they were always my favorite customers. Next story. I've been waiting decades for someone to ask me this. I worked at a small but nice hotel as the night auditor. The pool was across from the desk with windows around it, and something caught my eye around 3 a.m. I went closer to the glass and saw water falling from the ceiling into the pool. I grabbed the cordless and made my way upstairs to try to identify the source, and eventually heard water running in a guest room. I went back to the desk and saw there was someone in the room and tried calling several times with no response. I am a woman, and I was young then, and working alone. I knew this was a costly issue that I couldn't ignore, and ultimately, the maintenance man came in to check the room with me around 3:30 a.m. We opened the door, and we saw a tiny Asian man in tighty whities squatted down, frantically scooping water with his hands from the floor to the sink. He apparently got wasted at a business dinner and passed out after starting to fill the hot tub in the room. It was a suite. The damage was extensive, and he was moved to a regular room for the duration of his stay. When I saw him the next evening, he said, "Sorry, drunko." I will never forget it. Next story. I get back from lunch break at 3. One time I come back into the cooler from lunch and find 3 of the 5-gallon waste buckets knocked over. One on its side and the eggs all over the floor. The other 2, I swear, perfectly upside down with all 5 gallons of egg inside, like a jello mold. I couldn't get them right side up without spilling, so unfortunately, I did have to clean up 15 gallons of squashed egg. Genuinely, no clue how it happened. I was the last person in the cooler before lunch, and my boss checked the cameras to see if anyone else went in while I was gone, but nope. Even if they somehow fell off the cart they were on, I have no clue how they would have landed like that. Next story. I worked overnight at a few grocery stores, some that were open 24 hours. The weirdest thing I ever saw was the time me and my coworkers were outside catching a smoke before we gathered up the carts around 2 a.m. when a car sped into our parking lot, slammed on the brakes. Some chick in a miniskirt tumbles out, and she looks us all dead in the eyes while she squats down and takes a pee right next to the car. And without breaking eye contact, she climbed back into the car and sped off. And the weirdest part, not one of us made any comment about it. Because seriously, that was just a typical Saturday night for a third-shift grocery store worker. Next story. I used to work occasional overnight shifts, 2200 to 0700, for support for the application service provider arm of one of the big telecom companies here in the States back in my early career days. I'm a night person by nature, so it wasn't a big deal for me, but what I'd experience was sitting in the locked support room was 2 pods of 8 desks, and I'd hear what sounded like a party from the 1920s or 30s maybe, based on the music, around 0300 every time I did the graveyard shift. We all brought laptops back and forth, so there wasn't a ton of computer fans or equipment running aside from my own. The first time it happened, I just assumed I was maybe half asleep. Then I'd start smelling the booze and the cigarette smoke to go with it. I still dismissed it, until a coworker said something to me at a later time when we were out working our regular shift. He'd worked graveyard a couple of days before, and experienced that same thing and wanted to know if I had experienced it also, since I was the usual volunteer to cover that shift when the permanent guy was on leave, and he was pretty freaked out and didn't want to cover any more graveyards after that. He and I worked 1500 to 2300 usually. Ooh, this one could be ghosts. You know, unless you just got somebody smoking a cigarette and watching period pieces on Netflix in the other room, but I feel the supernatural at foot. What do you guys think? Next story. Not 3 a.m., but around 2 a.m. I used to work nights as a mainframe operator. Our building was opposite a nightclub. We would have 2 operators plus the security guard on site overnight. One night, our security guard called us through to reception, but to be quiet about it. When we got there, we witnessed a couple effing away on our office doormat. When they had finished and straightened up their clothes, they each went their separate way. Next story. It was probably about 15 years ago at one of my first jobs. I was working overnights at a resort casino, and it brought a lot of traffic from locals and people out of state since it was off a major interstate highway. Anyway, I was working, and some guy came in. I assumed it was a trucker. He had a black cap with tipped wings on the sides, and it was supposed to have a logo for Icarus, but it had this giant stain on it, and it read Ickis. I didn't really care, but he wanted to ask if we had any jobs available, and I gave him an application. and he looked at me like I was slow. He said, "Jobs that pay big and right now." I didn't really have an answer for him, but some fat trucker guy sitting at a table eating biscuits asked if he would dress up as Sasquatch and tell him everything was going to be all right. I then realized my mysterious job seeker had one leg and a really terrible prosthetic. He was completely game. I emptied out the cash drawer and was getting ready to move stations when my replacement came up and asked about how he was going to get into this readily available Sasquatch outfit with one leg. Oh, a true predicament. He figured it out eventually. He just took off his leg, and one sad, super fluffy Sasquatch leg just kind of flapped around while he talked to the trucker till dawn. I wish I stuck around, but my shift ended, and I assume someone got something out of that transaction. Next story. Night desk at a hotel. There was a state high school wrestling tournament in town. I heard a noise out by the pool, so I grabbed the aluminum baseball bat, yes, it was that kind of hotel, and went to investigate. 20 teenage boys, all in their tighty-whities, were stacked up in the sauna trying to sweat down to a lower weight class. It was, at best, a 5-person sauna. They'd even brought bolt cutters to break down the chains on the door, and several coaches were throwing tantrums at the front desk by 8 a.m. Next story. Used to work overnight at a 7-Eleven in Florida. Oh, I saw some crap. One time this guy came in literally covered in mud. At first glance, I thought he had a facial deformity, but it was like an inch thick of caked-on mud. He tried to buy a buzzball and fell backwards into a display and then threw up. After that, he kept coming in and out for like 2 hours, until finally some guys came in that knew him and they finally left with him. I had a couple of regulars who would come in and regularly break down talking about their lives. And then their husbands or boyfriends or girlfriends or wives who were also regulars would come in and do the same thing. They didn't tell me I'd be doing therapy when I got hired. It was also across the street from an illegal casino, and at a few times where some very drugged out people would come over, 1K on scratch-offs, and then wouldn't win anything. And I let a drunk homeless dude sleep in my car one time. There was just a bunch of crap going on. You did say this was Florida, though. I can't talk. I'm from Ohio. It's apparently the new Florida. Next story. Woman 3 times over the limit drove into petrol station forecourt, hitting one of the pumps, got out like nothing had happened, and she didn't even register that I was on the phone to the police. A druggie took a container of waste oil from the back of a restaurant and threw it all over the road. Police had to cordon off the road for hours to get it cleaned up. When the newspaper delivery guy came along, he ignored the police and just sped past them, skid on the oil, and then crashed his van. Guy smashed a jar of sauce over his own head, walked out of the shop, and tried to walk in front of a bus. There was plenty of other crazy crap, ODs, fights, girl ran straight in front of a car. I have seen it all, let me tell you. Next story. So, I worked at this Jack Shack at the edge of Portland, Oregon. It was the last adult establishment for almost 100 miles out. It was in a crappy neighborhood, and I bumped into the strangest of things. I saw a lot of things you wouldn't see anywhere else, like twinks showing up for a hookup, and their monogamous partner also shows up and it turns into a huge slap fight brawl. Had a guy jack the tip jar by shoving it down his pants and then putting his junk in it. Or at least it was how we found him. Strippers loved me and would come in and get naked on the floor to try things on. We did have changing rooms. It was all on their comfort level. And then they'd tip me. Had a parade of 12 furries in full suit coming to use the arcade. Couldn't imagine that cleaning bill. Had doms with subs crawling on their leashes, but seeing a guy get killed on camera that was in front of the building was pretty wild. It was just so fast. First, there were 3 people, and then there was only one, and he was on the floor as fast as the other 2 had disappeared. Next story. I was chatting with the guy who delivered the hotel newspapers when suddenly his eyes turned to the hallway at the other end of the lobby. I looked at my camera bank in time to see the pool door close. The house person was in charge of locking it, but I always checked, and clearly I had forgotten. I marched down there, opened the door, and politely yet firmly informed the man in the hot tub that he needed needs to leave because it is closed. He pretends he doesn't hear me for a few moments, and then I become a little bit more authoritative, and I tell him it is time for him to get up and get out of the hot tub and go back to his room. He then stands and turns to me with the biggest grin. Do you know those little white plastic nets they put some produce in? Well, it looked like he was wearing a thong made out of that. And even worse, or better, depending on your outlook, when wet, it was completely transparent. As was my having had enough of his hijinks. Next story. I met my wife at a gas station I worked overnights at. We bonded over roller grill egg rolls and Minecraft. We've both been diagnosed with autism. If you can believe it. I'm happy, but that's always felt like a weird where you meet someone kind of, given the time block. Well, congratulations. And I've never been diagnosed, but if the roller grill and Minecraft are the telltale signs, then everybody at school might have just been right. Next story. I used to work in a warehouse that had previously been a wartime assembly line. The rumor was that the warehouse was haunted by the ghost of a man that had been killed during an industrial accident. One night, one of the old hands said how he'd turned up a little early one shift to get ahead of a work order. While he was working on a pallet, he saw someone that he presumed was his colleague turning up for his shift, enter the warehouse, and go into the office area. Through the internal window, he could see the person moving around inside the office, and he headed over to greet him. When he entered the office area, he was startled to find no one there, and nowhere for them to have gone. It was only then that his colleague actually turned up and walked into the office area right behind him. On another night, a different coworker saw a man he didn't recognize walk into the men's bathroom. Wondering if they had a thief in the warehouse, the worker followed the man into the bathroom to challenge him, and once again, there was no one there, and nowhere for them to have gone. Another coworker related how one night a group of them were standing in one of the aisles of the warehouse, when one of them suddenly said, "Geez, do you feel that?" No one else knew what he was talking about, until another man suddenly reacted, and then shortly after that, another. When they spoke of what they'd experienced, all three of them said that a wave of cold had passed through them that the other people around them hadn't felt. It seems that, given the speed at which each man had experienced the unusual feeling of quickly passing cold, it had passed through the assembled group at the walking speed of a man. Oh, dude. Oh, man. I don't know if I'm just prone to suggestion in a story or whatever you want to call it, but I just felt the craziest wave of chill flow through me, and it's 3:26 a.m. as I'm recording this. Oh, that got really real. I even just whipped over my shoulder like expecting to see someone. Next story. Drive around a corner, and there in the middle of the road was a small naked man with a long blonde mullet. If I hadn't been with my mate, I would have never believed it. We went after him and went into his development and was totally gone, like just disappeared in front of us. He got nicknamed the Killinchy Idiot Gobbler. Next story. I picked up a shift and ended up leaving around 3 a.m. As I'm leaving the building, I see fire trucks in the street near this park nearby and a blanket over a body. I'm thinking, oh crap, a dead body. But then the blanket started moving up and down, like really moving. From what I could piece together, the fire department showed up in full force to respond to a homeless guy self-pleasuring himself in the middle of the park. I left right as the firefighters threw their hands up and started walking back to their trucks. LOL. Next story. Once when I did C-store overnights, a car flew into the parking lot. Door opened and a dude was very much thrown out onto the sidewalk. Car burned, rubber peeling out. This guy was incredibly high. I do not know what he was on, but he was very out of it. Still walking around, but you'd think he was lobotomized with how out of it he was. Called the police. They took their sweet time getting there while he went around staring at various customers who showed up and other harmless but creepy things. When the cops did show up, I found out why they weren't that concerned. This was a weekly occurrence. This guy would routinely take a ridiculous effing amount of drugs, and his friends would abandon him at a random gas station or grocery after they couldn't stand him for the night any longer. Cops would be called, then they'd put him in a cell for the night, and the cycle would repeat. It almost sounds like Walter White's fugue state. This guy might just be getting out of trouble. There's always something more at play. Except, I guess, when there's not, but, you know. Next story. Former night shift worker, but I've worked all shifts, and I'll tell you weird crap happens all day long. not just at 3 a.m. My most recent memory is a lady who was either on drugs or needed to be on drugs. She had a dog with her. I work at a convenience store with a deli. I told her that since we serve food, we didn't allow animals in the store. She insisted it was a service animal, which it clearly wasn't, even trained like a pet. She proceeded to try to buy some stuff and wanted to use Apple Pay. I said, yeah, that's fine. She stood there for at least 2 minutes, going through her phone. When she finally put it to the pin pad, it had timed out. I hit the button, and I asked her to try again. She again spent 2 minutes going through her phone. Same thing, took too long. After about 5 minutes of this, and after a long line of forms behind her, she finally got it, but the card declined. She then said, never mind, and left her stuff and proceeded to go out in the parking lot and just start giving out $20 bills to random people. Next story. I used to work night shifts at a self-serve gas station. One time a guy walked up to the window and asked me if I knew insert coworker's name. I said yes. Then he said he had a gun in his pocket and he was robbing me with his hand in his pocket. For some reason, tired, dopey me took it as a joke and I laughed in his face. He looked sort of befuddled and walked away into the night. I mean, he said he knew my coworker, so I guess I assumed he was kidding. The next night he actually did come in and rob the gas station, but with someone else working, and it was at gunpoint. I mean, what the F was I thinking there? Next story. Worked at McDonald's overnights. We'd have shut everything down for like 15 to 30 minutes between 3 to 4 a.m. to roll over the system or whatever you want to call it. One night we're all doing our shutdown tasks, and after 10 minutes, I walk by the first window. The window is absolutely shattered. Someone managed to rip a support beam holding up the fence outside and I guess javelin throw? It came through the window. The weird part was none of us heard it happen and there were at least 6 people working. I mean, the guy's probably upset the ice cream machine wasn't working, but, you can't go around breaking windows, guy. Next story. Worked night shift at the front desk of Bellagio. At 3 a.m., a man in a bathrobe tried to check a rotisserie chicken in as his wife. Security showed up and the chicken was still warm, but the man was dead serious. Don't ask about what we found in the cavity. Management later sent an email clarifying that food items cannot be registered as guests. Next story. I mean, it was closer to 2:30 a.m. actually, but boring night shift. There's nothing happening. Everyone's sitting around, just chilling, and my station's phone rings. The call display showed a bunch of garbled characters and symbols, so I answered it. After a moment of silence, I heard it, the Ghostbusters theme. After a few moments of confusion, I called out to the rest of the crew something like, "The F is happening over here," and hit the speakerphone button. They all heard it and saw the display. The song finished, and the call ended. Well, like all the Ghostbusters when they call you. Next story. A guy walked into the lobby of the hotel I work at in a downpour, sobbing and without a wallet or a phone because his friends ditched him at a bachelor party for a wedding in a town he wasn't from because they decided to prank him. He was full on sobbing, but I managed to get him to call his parents. He was like early 20s, and they asked for a number of the taxi company that does e-transfer, of which I knew of one, and thanked me for looking after their son. I gave him water and a towel as he sat in the lobby, dry heaving from sobbing so much. He walked a solid hour before finding a 24-hour lobby from a vineyard. He had no idea where he was and only had part of his Airbnb address he was staying at with his friends, and that they stole his phone and wallet and left him stranded again in a town he wasn't from and knew nothing about. And after the cab picked him up and took him to the now completed address of the Airbnb, thank you Google, his dad called about 10 minutes later to request if his son was picked up in the taxi to verify before he transferred the money, and then thanked me a whole lot for looking after his son. That kid needs new friends. Oh, that's so sad. Dear pranksters, that's not a prank. Next story. Someone fishing in our drainage holding pond. I used to go chill out on the loading dock when nights were slow, and one day I walk out and there was a fishing rod and a smoldering cig on the sidewalk. We used to keep goldfish in there to show the EPA the water was safe enough, but why the F was sneaking into our property at night to fish goldfish? Next story. The second weekend after I started at a gas station for night shift, and the first night at this location, the two women I was working with got into a fight. One was being a real idiot, side-talking crap about how you can't get into heaven being gay and not being directed towards her. They were both kind of laughing, and I didn't know them, so I figured that was just their thing. But they went full on with customers in the store. Then I tried to break it up, I caught an elbow, and then I gave up. And they kind of zigzagged more to the back of the store. I crap you not, a cop came in just at that moment, smiled, nodded at me, and I was like, hey, and pointed to them. And he had a, oh crap, look, and then pulled out his cuffs. I finished the night solo, and they both got fired. All before I even met my manager. I've also been flashed a few times. Only one of them was cool. Next story. I used to work as a doorman in an apartment complex populated by a number of odd characters. One of them was a woman who was a schizophrenic. She'd lived there on rent assistance and got disability payments. Generally, when she was taking her medications, she was still a full bubble-off level. Her delusions were all religion-based with demons and her neighbors casting spells on her through the walls. She cut up the walls and floor with a knife to try and stop the spells. It was this sort of thing. But every 6 months, she needed to get evaluated to keep her assistance checks coming. The way this should work is that the caseworker would stop in, see that she is taking her meds, that she isn't too crazy, check the box, and she keeps the assistance. But she didn't see it that way. If the caseworker saw her acting normal, then the caseworker might think she's cured and didn't need the assistance. So she would go off the meds for a few days and then would have an episode. One day she comes into the lobby and tells me that when she was in the elevator, Satan had essayed her with his tail. I checked the elevator. You wouldn't believe it, but no Satan, no ectoplasm, no reading on the PKE meter. So then I asked her if she was maybe essayed by a man on the elevator. Given the type of residents we get, essayers, mother essayers, father stabbers, father essayers, litterbugs who create a nuisance, it was unfortunately entirely possible. It took a while, but she told me that it was the actual red-colored Satan with pitchforks, horns, and a pointy tail, and it was actually Satan's tail that essayed her in the butt, and she needs to go to the hospital because she now has a demon inside of her. So I had to call for an ambulance. Before the EMS crew shows up, 2 cops arrive. One is just super annoyed to have to be there, and he is even more annoyed that his partner seems genuinely interested to hear about Satan and the demons and the neighbors casting perverted sex spells through the walls to make her horned up. EMS arrives, and they bring in a gurney, they set it up, they take her vital signs and tell her that they will take her to the Catholic hospital. She wants to go to the Jewish hospital, which is not only larger, but much closer. There is a standoff between her wanting to go to Jewish and the crew wanting to go to Catholic. The Jewish hospital probably has a run on the ER and is diverting, but that doesn't matter to the demon-possessed. Finally, the paramedic says, "You got essayed by Satan and you have a demon in you, right? Well, then we need to go to the Catholics because Jews don't know anything about removing demons, and Catholics do it all the time." She says, okay, and jumps up on the gurney. A couple days later, she's on her meds again. The caseworker gets to see her crazy episode and the checks keep coming for another 6 months. Next story. 3 a.m., working the graveyard at a hotel. We were on a downtown residential street. I'm outside, having a cigarette. I see someone about a block away walking in my direction, about 2 blocks away in the middle of the street. As he gets closer, I hear a noise getting louder. At this point, the cigarette's gone, but I'm intrigued. As he gets closer, it's a guy with a snorkeling mask and flippers, wearing a pair of Speedos. As he passes me, I nod hello. He ignores me and walks past towards a large park. 5 a.m., another cigarette break. I finish the cigarette, and from the opposite direction I hear, "Fwip, fwip, fwip." I have to stick around for this. It's the same guy, walking back where he came from, only this time, he's soaking wet. Next story. While doing graveyard janitorial, I met Japanese metal band Deer and Grey. It was at an auto shop, and they were getting their tour bus serviced. I'm assuming emergencies since it was nearing midnight. I walked around the corner and was very shocked by the sight of 5 leather and spike-clad Japanese dudes sitting in the lobby. But I think my random light-footed 16-year-old butt actually spooked them more. Next story. Setting: a big box home improvement store. Activity: a major reset of several contiguous departments, new displays, reorienting aisles, and more. Workforce: a contractor who is doing the work across multiple stores, one at a time. Contracted staff are a mix of single locations, and more than one and all 19 stores are involved. To prep the store for opening after 5 hours of reset, regular employees are being brought in at 3 a.m. every night for a week. On the fourth night, while both crews are present, a contractor on a scissor lift lowers it down, starts screaming, dismounts, and starts running through the back aisles. When he runs to the front of the store, he has ripped off all of his clothes and he looks like a wild man. The store supervisor on duty evacuates his people and calls the police. After about 10 minutes, the cops show up, and the now unoccupied, except for one, part of the store, they bring him out horizontally in thick orange straps and a sheet. Next story. A couple of things. I was a doorman, working a 12-hour night shift for just over minimum wage back around 1995. A naked woman went off the 9th floor balcony. I was the first one there. She was mush inside, and both legs were broken in several places. I could smell that her bowels were broken open too. There was blood on the grass under her head. There was nothing that could be done. She had a piece of bedsheet tied in a loose half-hitch around her neck. Her boyfriend said he woke up to find that she had threw herself over the balcony after tying the bedsheet around her neck and a couch leg. He said he tried to save her by cutting the bedsheet with a butcher knife, but she fell. I don't feel things, so it did not bother me at all, but I finished out my shift as I would expect any employee to do. Another time on that doorman job, some teenagers decided to play gangster. They had put on some blue and red clothes, and they were playing Crips and Bloods and were posing against each other. Then one night, they had a large fight in the park near the property. The front door opens, and a kid wearing red comes in. The back door opens and the kid wearing blue comes in. Both are beaten up and both are crying. They find out that they are running back to their mamas and have to take the same elevator. I was working security at a mall. In the middle of the night, I walk around at the end of the building and see a woman at the sidewalk ATM. She looks to be over 40, attractive, and wearing a business suit. I don't think anything of it. As I walk past her car, I see the passenger seat is a young man in his underwear holding clothes. I really wish that I could have said that whatever she was paying, I would do it for free and for a long time. Another night at the mall, I saw a truck driving slowly across the parking lot. There were two people riding in the back, yelling directions to the driver. I caught up to them and discovered that they had left the truck in a lot when they went drinking. And when they came back, they found that all the windows had been soaped up with Irish Spring. It was so thick that it looked like cake icing. They had turned on the defroster to try and melt it, and they scraped a little slit in it for the driver to see out of, but it wasn't enough. So we had the guys in the back try to guide him. I recommended that they not drive the vehicle until they could properly clean it, but they managed to get down the ramp and off the property and no longer my problem. One night I got a report that someone had hit a deer on the property. I went down to check it out and found that it was not on the property, but it was on the road. A cop arrived to find the deer still breathing, so he took a shotgun and put a slug in it. The two guys who hit it asked if they could have the deer. Cop said he doesn't care. So they picked up the deer and threw it into the back of their rental car, and the blood immediately gushed out and ran down into the spare tire well in the trunk. Next story. Not me, but my mother is a night shift janitor for a university. One of the buildings had formaldehyde cadavers, human bodies, stored where she had to clean. My mother swears that she would see ghosts at the end of the hall. The ghost would slowly disappear as soon as she got closer before she usually thought it was a student, as no one should be in the building but her during that time. She eventually had to change buildings because it spooked her too much. Next story. I worked the night shift a couple of times at different stores for a bunch of years, but since we were basically locked in for most of the night and the customers were locked out, I never witnessed anything particularly wild firsthand, but I do have a story or two from coworkers and have seen a thing or two when clocking out in the morning. Story from a coworker. Customer had sat down on a patio furniture display while shopping and fallen asleep. The evening staff somehow failed to notice her during their closing time sweep, and night crew found her an hour or two after close. Personal experience? Worked a night shift on the eve of a local holiday. Walked out the front door at the end of my shift to see a section of the garden center trashed, kiosk windows broken, pots smashed, bags of garden soil ripped open and thrown around, most likely the work of some folks who had partied a bit too hard and had nothing better to do after last call. Jerks. Next story. Not 3 a.m., but overnight. I worked at a very popular resort on the west coast of Florida, and one evening a man checked in and asked if he was going up with one of the bellhops. He asked if anyone had ever jumped from our hotel. The bellhop said no. Well, not so subtle foreshadowing, huh? And around this time, I'm leaving the hotel. I saw the two men going up on the elevator. I come back at around 8:30 a.m., and there are fire trucks, ambulances, police, the whole shebang. I had a feeling, but it was confirmed shortly after. Not only did he jump, but he misjudged the length he had to jump out, and he hit a few obstacles on the way down, and it was very messy. I suppose he got what he wanted either way. Honorable mention to the man who unalived himself in the bathroom while his family was enjoying the beach just a mere 60 feet away. Why do people unalive themselves on vacation? My only guess would be that they think their family is distracted or having fun. It's just all very sad. I didn't even know that was a thing. That is really sad. But anyways, guys, that concludes our stories of the hauntingly wicked and weird night shifts. If you guys have any exciting or confusing or scary stories that you would like to share, feel free to drop those down below in the comments because a lot of these are very silly and very fun. Or if it's spooky, feel free. Have a chill, have some fun. But most importantly, thank you for hanging out with me, and we will see you in the next one. Goodbye! Man, the Ghostbusters theme song's still in my head.